All right, for this recipe, we got smothered pork chops. First thing you want to do, as always, you want to wash your meat. Go ahead and get that laid out so you can get that well seasoned. And like everything else I say, you season it to your liking. For the people who aren't fresh on the seasoning idea, for me, I like to use the Slap Your Mama spicy for this one. Black pepper, got a couple of little exotic seasonings. So, but for this one, it's the Slap Your Mama, the black pepper. Also use a little Cajun seasoning. After, make sure you season both sides of your meat. You do not need to season heavy. With the way everything is going to be mixed together by the end, your flavors will be just fine. If you do go a little heavy on the seasoning, as you'll see certain areas I kind of hit harder than I wanted to, I just go ahead and slap the other side of the meat, take a look at it, see how that side ended up seasoning by grabbing the seasoning off the one that was over seasoned. With the same seasonings I season my meat with, on the side I'm gonna go ahead and season my flour when I get to that stage.
Coming up on the USAA Insurance Halftime, Adam Schefter's insider update on Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. And it's a sneak peek at the first episode of Man in the Arena. Tom Brady's first-hand account of each of his 10 Super Bowl seasons, all coming up at halftime. Man-to-man coverage from the 49ers, and Jimmy Ward locked up on Cooper Kupp. Stay with the ground game and Darrell Henderson. He's all Shire in the stop for San Francisco. Speaking about that update on Kyler Murray, these 49ers took a lot of heat for losing at home last week.
All right, after seasoning the flour and everything, go ahead and grab a fork or a whisk. What you want to do, your flour shouldn't look white. It should have some sort of tint to it. What you want to do is take your seasonings and you're going to mix them into your flour. Make sure you mix everything very well so that you can get an even coat on everything. After everything is seasoned, I'm going to go ahead and start to coat your pork chops in your flour. For this, you don't need a heavy coat. I would just make sure you coat all sides, because what you're going to end up doing, as you'll see later in the video, is we're going to brown these pork chops.
305 pounds?
Yep. All right, you just need a little cooking grease, just enough to coat the bottom of your pan. You don't want to deep fry your pork chops because this pan is going to continue to be used. I'm going to go ahead and drop my pork chops in the pan. For this recipe, I had about 8 pork chops. I cook 5 of them, then I cook the other 3. But for this purposes, I'm going to show you I'm going to cook these 5. But what I'm doing is I have them sitting in the grease. After they sit there for a second, give them about 5 minutes on each side. Let them sit there on medium heat, medium to medium high, and then you're gonna flip them over. When you flip them over, you should have a nice tan to brown tint. Like I said, they don't have to be cooked all the way through because you're gonna actually be cooking them with the roux and everything else that I'm gonna make. All right, so after your pork chops are brown, I went ahead, I removed my pan from the heat. I lowered my heat to a low heat at this point. When I remove it, what I want to do is I want to get some of the temperature down so that I don't burn as I start making the roux. So the flour that I have seasoned, I'm going to set to the side. And as I put the pan back on the stove, I go ahead and put about 2 tablespoons of flour to start. Now, when you're making your smothered chicken or pork chops, when it comes down to it, that flour is what's going to thicken your gravy. Last thing you want to do is end up burning your flour. So as you can see, as I'm doing it, I go ahead and throw the flour in. I'm at the point where I'm at like about 3 tablespoons, and I'm mixing the flour in. Put it down. Your pan's gonna get hot. As I'm mixing, you'll see that I do pick the pan up at times. And if you're watching closely, you'll see that it mixed with the cooking oil that was left. My flour is starting to thicken. And the reason you want to keep stirring is you don't want to allow the flour to burn. So as you'll see, I try and make sure I get to the edges as well as I get to the middle. This is going to be a constant motion. As you're doing this, you're going to watch your flour is going to start to brown. You're going to brown it until you see the tint of the gravy you prefer. Being that I had 8 pork chops, as you see, I went to add a little more flour. My flour is seasoned, so every time I did that, I'll continue to add flavor to the pan that I'm going to be smothering these pork chops in. Now that my roux is thickened, I try to hold my garlic back since I left it on my cutting board. And I go ahead and I drop my onions in first. Garlic is something that's very fragile. As you see, I cook with it a lot. But the first thing I do is I get my onions in and I'm starting to break them down. I'm mixing my onions with the roux. You'll start to get the smell of the onions in your seasoning. You want to make sure your onions are grabbing flavor, but as well as the flavors cooking off into that pan. Once you have your onions completely coated and it's fairly thick, you want to go ahead and grab your cutting board or wherever you have your garlic chopped up. For this recipe right here, I use 3 garlic cloves. But you're going to take your garlic and you're going to mix it with the onions and this roux.